Ever wonder why some people thrive under pressure while others break? It's not luck, it's science. Welcome to the Mind Performance Podcast. I'm Lindsay Paoli, a therapist and a mental performance strategist. Each episode, you'll get expert insights, real stories from high performers, and small shifts that lead to big results, so you can be better at what matters. Let's dive in. What if the reasons behind your exhaustion, that fatigue, the feeling of being inconsistent, of doubting all of your decisions, and of feeling like you just can't keep up in a world that seems to be going on without you, especially in the business world, isn't rooted in what we're constantly told that it is, with a simple fix of taking medication because of a chemical imbalance or because you need to be reading more health books? What if instead you're actually just under-nourishing your brain? Today, I'm going to talk about the mind fundamentals, the 7 basic factors that your brain needs every day, not even to perform optimally, but just to perform at baseline. And I can guarantee that you're missing at least 3 of these on a daily, consistent basis. By the end of this episode, you're going to know all of the 7 that your brain requires and how to start improving your mental performance on your own with no outside help immediately. In the last episode, I shared that I was first into therapists for symptoms of anxiety and depression, but quite frankly, I had been ignoring really clear symptoms for a very long time before getting to a breaking point of suicidality and really dark negative thoughts. The thing is, in the working world, many of the symptoms that I was facing are so normalized as just part of being a high performer and a high achiever that I wasn't paying attention to them, and likely you aren't paying attention to them either. Some of these signs might be just the feeling of constant exhaustion. The moment you wake up, you are already dreading the day ahead. You feel like you have no extra energy and you don't really know how you're going to pull through having enough energy to get through the day, but you're also very accustomed to that lackluster pull through. I was really also unpredictable emotionally. I think all of my relationships, which were few and far between, can attest to that. People were walking on eggshells around me because despite me not having the energy, I also had this pent up rage that just, if you poked me the wrong way, had the possibility of coming out at any moment. And quite frankly, a lot of the time, it would be very easily brought out if I was drinking alcohol, which kind of mitigated my need to remain normal for social circumstances. So that rage was just pent up and ready to come out at any time. And it often came out at the people that I cared about the most. While I had this rage, I also felt just numb. Like I didn't have room for excitement, with the exception of being able to rage, the ability to celebrate really exciting things like a promotion, which just became my norm of getting promoted every 6 months. It never felt exciting. Or just other small work wins in my relationships, moving in together, getting engaged. None of that felt exciting or worth celebrating. I quite frankly did not have the energy for the celebration because everything else was draining my energy on the back end. Finally, I knew I wanted things to be different. That was the most frustrating thing. I think that that's also what contributed to that underlying rage is I knew this isn't what I wanted. I had really big visions of exactly what I did want, but if I didn't have the energy to celebrate the things that were going in the right direction, seemingly, then I certainly didn't have the energy to undo the habits and patterns and things that got me to where I was then, to create a whole new version of this life. So I had no idea where to start. And I just felt so frustrated with the disconnect of where I was supposed to be versus where I was. Like I said, I feel like these are really relatable, normal symptoms that most people who are high performers can relate to. And we even joke about it on social media as just being the norm of being high performers. But at the end of the day, they are not how you're supposed to feel. And I say that again as a testament to my own framework is I don't feel that way anymore. And I see people saying how normal it is on social media. And it makes me feel sorry for them. And these are the people that a lot of people look up to, that you're likely watching and you're like, okay, good. This makes me feel valid in my experience. But there is a different version of what life and high performance and reaching your dreams can feel like. And it is not that. And they just have more work to do. And you also get to do the work to get here. And it is a constant building of learning that will never end. But I do see some frequent mistakes that people make in trying to overcome these feelings, especially in the world of entrepreneurship and high performance. Most people, I think, I mean, obviously, I attract my people like you, I feel are skeptical of the medical industry and of therapy specifically. Like they don't want to go speak with somebody who's not going to understand their lifestyle, their drive, their ambition, and have them try and tell them the things they should be doing. So I completely relate to not wanting to go to a therapist that does not get what this life looks like. But they may try once they get to a breaking point, just like I did, and then be prescribed medication and try to take it and then be frustrated that it's not working. And so that's one mistake that people try is just the typical route of mental health. I shouldn't feel this way when I wake up. Another way is a lot of people will just dive headfirst into fixing themselves through constant self-help strategies. So you may have like 5 different coaches coaching you on everything from mindset to emotions to you can get everything on the internet right now. And so people are looking to fix themselves with this constant barrage of self-help. God forbid, ChatGPT has made this so much easier. And if you are using ChatGPT as your personal coach or therapist, no shame, but it's not going to help because ChatGPT is literally wired to mirror exactly what you're saying and feeling instead of challenge you to grow. And that's why having the human aspect is so important. It's also why self-help books and the do-it-yourself courses, they're only going to get you so far. You need somebody with an outside perspective to kindly like love nudge you and be like, okay, yes, and we need you to get out of your own bullshit. And an outsider has to do that. A lot of people, especially in this industry, will go to like retreats and kind of like these escapist, especially plant medicine type retreats. Hang on, I want to caveat this by saying I totally believe in the power of hallucinogenics and of shifting your state and of using nature's medicine. But I think that a lot of times, because it has become so popular in the self-help world and in the high performance world, that it's not done very well and it doesn't take actual neuroscience and trauma in mind. And so a lot of times what I do see is people go to these retreats and they take ayahuasca, for example, or whatever it is that they do end up taking, and they have these really powerful introspections about the trauma that they experienced, and it's brought to the surface, and there's not a way to process it or to reorganize it in a meaningful way in your mind. It's simply there. And it becomes even more of a burden for you to have to process on top of all of the other things that you were trying to fix, which was just your basic day to day of being able to organize your thoughts and being able to have hard conversations with your team or with your clients. Now you're faced with this massive trauma that you had never considered trauma before, but that this plant medicine has brought to the surface. And a lot of these retreats don't have professionals that help you to mitigate that trauma in a meaningful way, to interpret it and reprocess it in a helpful way that then is going to improve your day-to-day functioning, as well as overcome the really heavy potential story. So all of this to say is I see you trying. I have been in your shoes trying, and it sounds so frustrating, but we have complicated this and it's not that difficult. And so the problem with all of these things is that we're 10 steps ahead of where we should be. You have to start at the basics to build a foundation for how to perform on a day-to-day basis. And none of those ways take into account the small requirements that your brain has to have to function, which is something that I didn't understand either until getting into grad school and deciding how I wanted to show up as a therapist and how I could be most helpful to people. So one thing that I think most people struggle with understanding because of the very strong marketing behind mental health medication is the concept that we are going to rewire our brains with the new brain chemistry through SSRIs specifically, which are marketed to most people to help us improve our focus and our mood throughout our day. It's based on this premise that we have a lack of serotonin, which is our well-being neurotransmitter that regulates our moods, regulates our sleeps, regulates our digestion, and helps us to feel our best throughout the day. And so the premise is that our brain chemistry is off and we need more serotonin to perform optimally. So SSRIs are reuptake inhibitors that help us to take the serotonin that already exists. We're not creating more serotonin necessarily. We're regulating our serotonin more consistently throughout the day so that we don't completely spend it at the beginning of the morning and then have none to last throughout the evening. And this all made sense to me when I was told all of this through therapists on my journey, right? Okay, let's dose out the serotonin that I have. What I learned in grad school is like, it's really easy to create serotonin. Why is nobody talking about that? SSRIs don't help you create more serotonin. You have to create more serotonin through the daily habits that you're performing or not performing, which will decrease your serotonin production. Serotonin is super simple to produce, and it's exactly what the mind fundamentals help you to produce. Is all of these things are the basic foundation for building serotonin and helping you to feel better. Another really important thing I want you to consider as you're taking yourself through this endeavor of seeking massive transformation is just the basic premise of neuroplasticity, which is the understanding of how our brain is wired to work. Neuroplasticity states that our brain can change at any given time. So the whole game of teaching an old dog new tricks being impossible is a fallacy. We learned about 50 years ago that your brain does not stop developing at age 25. In fact, you continue to learn, grow, shift beliefs, learn new skills up until the day that you die. But in order to do so, you require consistency because your brain is looking to automate any habits that it's doing regularly. And so when you're doing these one-off things where you're taking all advice from all of these different coaches and going in a million different directions, you're not building consistency. You're building frantic energy and wiring constant, like new habits in new different directions. When you go to a retreat and expect this massive transformation, you have this new awareness that then there's no consistency in the habits or your thinking or the challenge of the new perspective. And so there's no capability for building the new belief because that consistency is not there. So with the mind fundamentals, we're building not only consistency and a pattern of new habits to be practiced on a day-to-day basis, we're also building the serotonin boost that we need in order to actually feel the transformation. So the solution is not all of these things that you're doing. It's being really consistent and practicing these 7 science-based habits on a day-to-day basis and doing them in such small increments that it becomes hard for you to not do. I want you to do them on such a small scale that it feels almost impossible to not include them in your day-to-day practice. And these are things that honestly, you're likely already doing on a day-to-day basis. But as the acronym for the Mind Fundamentals teaches you, the practice of being mindful in doing them is also the skill building that comes with the practice of the Mind Fundamentals. So I feel like I'm speaking in circles here or speaking in tongues. The Mind Fundamentals are 7 daily habits for you to practice to boost your serotonin and improve your neuroplasticity and actually create the transformation that you need. And they are an acronym for mindful. So without further ado, the Mind Fundamentals. We've got movement, intention, nourishment, deep connections, fresh air, unplugging, and learning. These are the 7 simple things that if you're doing them every single day are meeting the baseline requirements for what your brain needs to create baseline levels of serotonin and for you to rewire the neuroplasticity for shifting your beliefs, paying attention to your thoughts and your patterns, and being mindful enough to create new belief systems and patterns. So let me talk a little bit about each of these. And I also want to mention that I do have a course that goes really in depth into all of these within the Rewire, which also is boosted with community and accountability with me to challenge you. And you can get access to that by going to lindsaypaoli.com/rewire. I only charge $47 per month for this. And you get access to hours worth of coursework, specifically around the mind fundamentals and almost anything else that you can think about, as well as 2 coaching calls, one being community coaching and office hours, and one being a specific new strategy that you learn each month with me. So back to the mind fundamentals, our generic overview. Movement is the first one that I noticed in my personal life, and maybe you also notice, because I find that most high performers already have a very clear correlation in their minds and their bodies that the more they move, the better that they're performing at work. There is a flaw in the way that most high performers tend to think about this that I do go more into in the Rewire, in that most of them tend to only rely on cardio as being the number one outlet. And I teach that there are 3 different forms of movement that are specific to mental enhancement. There is cardio, there is weightlifting or strength training, and then there's flexibility and stretching, such as things like yoga. These each have 3 very different strengths in strengthening different aspects of your mind and your mental performance. And most people, you may be included, tend to rely on cardio because it's where they get the feeling of achievement fastest. So if we think of our high performers who are also Ironmen and triathletes, or they run marathons, or I've had a lot of clients who are competitive swimmers, all of these cardio building exercises tend to go in mind with the high performer attitude. And there is a skill to it, but we want to differentiate our workouts, and we go into that more. And maybe we'll do an episode on that. There's so many reasons to be practicing movement. Not only is it going to get your brain up and running, but as we talk about trauma, which most of you likely don't think that you have, if you do, I like to think of it as just stored emotions that then become problematic and cause triggers that are unhelpful for us later on in life. And so whether you recognize the trauma or not, you may recognize a lot of the symptoms of the stored emotions, whether it comes from pain, like achy joints or sore muscles or digestive issues. All of this is from old unprocessed emotions, and different forms of movement are also going to help us to move those things so that we're thinking more freely on our day-to-day basis. Being a high performer also requires us to be incredibly creative and solution focused, and that requires us to be thinking quickly. And when you're storing old emotions, you're not able to tap into that as easily. Intention is also one of the fundamentals that, when I look back on me crafting this framework, is the one that stood out to me as the most powerful. Intention is the practice of paying attention to what you actually want and being so intentional with your thoughts, your energy, and your processes throughout the day. And when I was at the peak of my corporate career, I was flying by the tail of my, flying by the seat of my pants, doing everything that I was supposed to be doing and making sure that I was doing the best that I could. And I didn't have the capacity to sit down and think, because I was moving into promotions and higher levels of luxury in the hospitality industry. But I didn't have time to sit and think, is this actually what I want out of life? No. And like, if I did sit and think about it, I would get really depressed and overwhelmed because I didn't want to be a director or a VP. I didn't grow up as a little girl wanting these roles or this level of power or to lead people. All I wanted was a happy, healthy relationship that felt good. Quite frankly, I had no idea what that looked like because that was not modeled to me. And I also wanted kids. Like, I just wanted to be a mom. I used to fantasize when I was a little kid about having 10 babies, and I would spend my days talking to my 10 imaginary babies and taking care of all of them, so much so that my mom took me to a doctor because she was concerned that I was fucking crazy. All I wanted was kids, and I was so focused on doing everything that everybody was telling me I was supposed to do to be successful that my life looked nothing like what I had wanted my life to look like. So intention to me is the practice of doing the very small little things to make sure that you're attuned with your long-term vision, such as spending time every year, quarter, month, considering what that vision is, allowing that vision to change and grow, and then reverse engineering it and making sure that you have a practice of paying attention to that, whether that's affirmations, meditations, visualizations, practice of gratitude, journaling, dream journaling, just challenging your own thinking, creating to-do lists, making sure that you're keeping the big picture in mind. And so intention gets thrown around a lot in the self-help world. But to me, that's what intention is. And again, remember that our goal for these is consistency. So you should not be doing all of these every single day. You should be doing the smallest bare minimum that you can get away with for that day. in order to continue moving you in the right direction. Our third fundamental is nourishment. Another thing that when I was at my worst, I was not paying attention to. Still today, when I get into the prototype way of being an entrepreneur, where you just throw yourself into work and you get into this masculine energy of doing instead of being, and you can eat when you need to, or you can eat when you're finished working. That is not the way that your brain works. Nourishment is paying attention to the basic requirements of how fueling your brain should look and knowing exactly what you should be eating and making choices that will nourish your brain. So that's not a day of waking up, chugging coffee, working for the next 4 hours in a frantic energy, realizing that you're hungry, maybe at 1 p.m, going and eating a piece of beef jerky and powering through the rest of the day and telling yourself that you'll have a big dinner. No, your brain, your serotonin production, your habits require you to pay attention to something as small as your hunger cues. And knowing the difference between a carb sugar craving for rapid energy and talking to your brain and knowing that you're going to give it what it needs, which is protein. Especially for my ADHDers, you have to have protein first thing in the morning or you will be all over the place and then wondering why. So knowing all of the basics of what your brain and body need, not so much in like counting macros. I'm not a counting macros type girly. I don't believe that our ancestors, who I think were living their best versions of what our body was designed, were counting exactly how many bites of the tiger that they're eating was helping them to feel their best. So nourishment is understanding the basics of fueling your body and actually doing that. And that usually requires some planning that a lot of people don't like to do, but it's crucial, especially once you start having kids. I know that you run out of time and energy, and fueling yourself feels silly. Another thing for nourishment is not just the food of fueling your brain, but like fueling your brain for anything outside of work. So allowing yourself some whimsy, a little bit of play and creativity. So having an outside habit, whether it's like learning a new instrument or dancing or painting or just finding these creative outlets, are something that most high performers put on the back end or say they want to do and then never get around to doing. But once you're actually doing them, it makes you so much better in the way you're performing in your day to day, because your brain is literally made of two hemispheres, the logical and the emotional creative. And when you're not fueling the emotional creative, you're going to get very stuck in the logical, because the two are meant to go hand in hand and coexist. So you also have to be nourishing that creative flow outlet side. All right. Deep connections is making sure that you're connecting with other people. And I don't mean like social media has made it so easy to like other people's things or feel like you've got a pulse on how people are doing. I mean, vulnerably showing up to a relationship and asking for help when you need it, or vulnerably showing up for them when they're not asking, and taking time out of your day to nourish a relationship in ways that we've really forgotten how to do now that we're so focused on output. Deep connections is a different way of being in relationships than I think a lot of us are attuned to doing, especially when you get into your early 40s, like I am. We feel like we don't have enough time, because that would be self-care, is the time to take care of our relationships and have a girls' night out. That's taking away from my husband. That's taking away from my children. That's taking away from my alone time. But having the mindset that taking care of relationships, making time for relationships, showing up in relationships is also going to help me understand who I am and build this community that you absolutely have to have in order to truly be thriving in any form of success. Fresh air. There's just so much more that I could say on all of these. And I feel like I'm giving you guys such a half-ass answer on this, but I have to remind myself, like, this is not supposed to go super long. And we will get into the nitty-gritty of all of these at some form, or like I said, you can get it in the rewire, because there's so much more that I could go into. But fresh air, I guarantee you, I guarantee you're not getting enough fresh air. If you're listening to this podcast and you are juggling all the things, you are trying to build your business and you're also trying to take care of a family or create a family and do all the things, you are not getting outside enough. Not with intention, you're not. Nope. You may tell yourself like, I'm walking outside to like get from my car to my office and that counts as fresh air, but that doesn't count as fresh air because the whole premise of all of this is that you're mindfully taking the time to take care of your brain. And that requires that you actually like go outside and benefit from the enhanced oxygen flow of being outdoors, of absorbing the vitamin D from the sun. All of the mind fundamentals should be practiced as just a state of being, not as a state of checking your to-do list. And I should have said that at the very beginning, but fresh air especially, it's not going to feel like you're accomplishing anything. And that's why most people never end up doing them, or they think that they're doing enough of them and they're not. And that's why you feel like shit, is because you're not doing these basics to the level that your mind and body actually need in order to create the systems and functions and cycles that your body functions on. 93% of your life is spent indoors. And I think like 7% of that or something is in your car. So it's just in a confined space that's not outdoors. So most of us are only spending 7% of our lives outdoors. It's recommended that you get at least 17 minutes per day outside. And that's just basic functioning for you to be reaping the benefits of the sun and the oxygen and grounding. Literally, there's so many studies on the benefits of just touching the dirt with your feet and how it regulates your mood, boosts serotonin, improves sleep. So 17 minutes outdoors is the minimum. And most people are not even coming close to that, especially corporate workers. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have the time and energy and flexibility to be creating this life of freedom that you told yourself that you're creating, you need more time outdoors. Work outdoors if you need to. All right. Unplugging refers to the practice of sleep. So taking breaks and getting rest is what unplugging is the umbrella over. Most people, especially again, high achievers, are not getting restful sleep. It's one of the most common complaints that I hear is, yeah, I'm not sleeping consistently, or I only need like 4 hours to sleep. I wish I could sleep more, but my body doesn't allow me to. The recommended amount of sleep on the low end is 7 hours, up to 9 hours for women. We know that women require more sleep than men now. Studies are consistently showing this. I always joke that it's because we work harder. It really pisses men off. So women should be on the high end of this spectrum of sleep. And a lot of times we tell ourselves, I mean, I've never slept that long, so I just don't need it. But do I feel fatigued and like I can't sustain energy throughout the rest of my day? Yeah. So I'm here to tell you, you need more sleep. And there's so many little small factors that contribute to the way that you sleep. And the mind fundamentals all work hand in hand in that a lot of those factors are other mind fundamentals. So if you're not getting enough consistent movement throughout your day, you're not going to sleep well. If you're not nourishing your body appropriately and you're surviving solely on sugar and caffeine, you're not going to sleep well. If you are not going outdoors enough, if you're not exposed to the sunlight, which is literally what primes your circadian rhythm, which determines your natural sleep patterns, it's determined by sunlight, by your light exposure. So if you're not getting enough natural sunlight, especially first thing in the morning, you're not going to be able to sleep well at night. Or if you get too much artificial light exposure, then it's going to make you feel like frazzled and exhausted earlier and just like more fatigued because your brain doesn't have enough darkness. So also making sure that you get that dark at the end of the night is really imperative. And I'm going to note that like when I was at my worst, I was also working on graveyard at the Mirage. And so there was like no darkness. Like I literally slept during the daylight and then would work at night. And in a casino, you never know what time it is anyways. And so I was getting too much light, and working graveyard just fucking sucks anyways. But a lot of people do it, and you just got to figure out how to hack your circadian rhythm and get that fresh air. All right. And our final one is learning. So this is where the growth is. This is a lot of that neuroplasticity in making sure that you're constantly challenging your brain to grow. And so a really great way to continue the practice of learning is listening to podcasts. So thank you for being here. You should thank yourself for being here, whether you're doing it while you're driving or on your break at work or whatever the case may be. Being in the constant practice of learning is also going to keep your brain performing at its best in your business and in life. Learning, I think, is very linked to movement and that trauma link there, because when you're learning something new, your body is going through crazy sensations. Like if you're learning something new and it's easy, you're not trying hard enough. Learning for me, anyways, is like usually exhausting and frustrating and takes me back to all of these old stories about myself, or I get physical reactions. I'm learning how to do this podcast today and I'm sucking at it and I'm sweating. Anyways, so movement is important because it helps you to kind of like shake off a lot of the physical sensations that come up with learning. And you want the two to go hand in hand. You want to constantly be learning and you want to constantly be moving to shake off a lot of these physical, emotional sensations that come up with new endeavors. But especially if you're going to be the best at anything, or you're going to build all of these great things that you have in your mind, you have to be in the constant practice of learning and being attuned to how to keep your mind and body sharp while you do it. One of my favorite things to teach people is Warren Buffett, who is now still, I think, one of the richest people in the world, spends the majority of his workday learning. He's got his systems so dialed in with his teams. He's got all of his businesses basically running on autopilot. And his job, he spends approximately 8 hours of his day reading books and learning new things to refine and tweak the systems that he has in place to continue to get richer. Hopefully he's also, getting good sleep and journaling and, I'm sure he's got all these other things dialed in, but learning is one of those things that the higher you get on the totem pole of success, everybody around you just understands that you have to be learning in order to grow and be the best. Not everybody has the rest of the mind fundamentals dialed in. And that's also why you see people who get super successful, quote unquote, successful, or super wealthy, and they're also super miserable or in terrible relationships or have these constant life crises that we see. And so it kind of fuels your fear of becoming successful. But just know, if you start with the fundamentals, you're taking care of your mind and body, and you're building in a sustainable way that when you get there, it doesn't feel that way. Okay. I don't know why this is such a hard podcast to film, but I did tell you last time that I was taking you behind the scenes. And so now you've seen it. I've stuttered my way through this. Hopefully this was engaging to you. I appreciate you being here. Just a reminder, you got to suck at anything to be good at anything. And we are sucking today, but still doing it. So which of these habits do you notice you need to start paying more attention to? As a high performer, you're likely thinking you want to get better at all 7, but I'm going to challenge you to do this sustainable, consistent way, and instead challenge yourself to only focus on 1 that you're going to improve incrementally every single day, and choose from movement, intention, nourishment, deep connections, fresh air, unplugging, or learning, and choose how you're going to improve upon it. If you download on my website, lindsaypaoli.com, the Mind Fundamentals ebook, Compounding Consistency, there's not only a habit tracker, but there's also a recommendation of the habits for each of the specific fundamentals for you to pull from so that you are consistently building and you don't have to put in the time and energy to consider what those will look like. So I highly recommend that. Also, if today's episode has been helpful, I would love, especially because we're launching, and this is part of my initial launch series, for you to share this with somebody, share it on your Instagram stories and tag me at Mind Performance Pod. Leave a review sharing how much you've enjoyed this. And when you leave a review and share either your review or DM me to let me know which review is yours, then you will be entered into our raffle to win some of our amazing prizes, including a free scholarship to the Mind Performance Accelerator, which is typically $5,000, free months of the Rewire Mastermind, which is typically $47 per month, or lots of other prizes, including the Mind Master Planner and other things. So I really look forward to your responses. Thank you so much for being here along with me. This is painful, but we did it. And the next episode is an amazing guest interview with my guest, Matthew Boyer, who is a friend of mine, the top bookie in the Las Vegas gaming industry. So he is an illegal bookmaker, and he's actually currently serving a federal sentence of 1 year. And so we recorded this a few weeks before he started his prison sentence. And despite having done the wrong thing to grow his success, his mindset is so powerful. His ability to pivot is so powerful. The way that he took his sentence and his accountability for having done things the wrong way and still have the mindset of how to get through his prison sentence and come out the other end so much better is just incredibly powerful. And I can't wait for you to hear it. So stay tuned. That's coming up next. Thanks for listening to the Mind Performance Pod. If you got value today, make sure to subscribe and leave a quick review. It really helps others find the show. As a thank you, grab your free Mind Fundamentals Compounding Consistency Habit Tracker at the bottom of the homepage on lindsaypaoli.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Mind Performance Pod for tips, updates, and behind the scenes content. Can't wait to see you in the next episode.